Welcome, 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 welcome. Welcome to the special joint Park and Recreation and Senior Commission meeting on this Monday evening, September 30th, 2024. I now call this meeting to order. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please call the roll.
I would be happy to, Chair Fields. So, Chair Fields?
Present.
Vice Chair Witcher? Commissioner Chiappi?
Present.
Commissioner Ocampo?
Present.
Commissioner Trapp?
Present.
Youth Commissioner Jelniker?
Here.
And from the Senior Commission, we have Commissioner Swerko Godicki?
Here.
Vice Chair Wang?
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Lees, Commissioner Webb, and Commissioner Lorenz will not be present for today's meeting.
Okay, noted. We are excited to be here in person with options for those who choose not to be in person to participate virtually. There are several ways to participate. For those attending in person, complete a yellow request to speak slip and hand it to the recording secretary. If participating remotely, use the raise your hand feature in Zoom and you will be called on at the appropriate time. If calling in via phone, press *9 to raise your hand, and when called upon, press *6 to unmute. These options for public comment will remain available until I close the public comment period for each specific item. Okay. The consent calendar items will be brought forth at the next scheduled regular meeting of each of our respective commissions. So we get to skip that for this meeting. And that leads us to public comment for non-agendized items. Sorry, are you, okay. Sorry, staff was making an eye at me, and so I thought for one moment maybe I'd missed something, but no, moving on. General public comment will be brought forth, at the next scheduled regular meeting for each of the commissions. Just like the consent calendar. Very good. So with that, it appears that we can move on, but I will just briefly read, in the interest of a public meeting, I'll just let all of you know that we look forward to a respectful meeting from all who are participating. And that leads us to the reason for our business here tonight, fiscal sustainability strategy update. So we will be hearing a presentation from our interim business manager, Suzette Silberman, to introduce the item and present. Bear with us for a moment. We're having a bit of a mic challenge with our staff presenter.
Okay.
Yes, very good.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Tonight, you all be receiving a presentation from a consultant that the department has been working with, Farrell Bueller of 110%. We employed 110% to analyze our current fiscal position, and they have helped generate some recommendations that we are hoping to turn into a policy that we can use for pricing all of our recreational activities. There will be time for you guys to give your feedback after the presentation, and we will take that feedback and incorporate it into the policy, which will be coming back to you guys later this year before going to City Council for approval.
Farrell, if you're present, if you could please share your screen. Thank you.
All right, I'm guessing my screen is being shared, correct?
Hi, Pharrell. It seems like you may be muted. Can you please unmute yourself?
I am unmuted. It's on your end.
Through the chair, we're just experiencing some technical difficulties.
Okay. Can you hear me yet?
Bear with us as we sort out continuing Zoom challenges. What is this, year 4, year 3 of Zoom? But here we are.
Yes.
Thank you, staff, for sorting this out.
Thanks, everybody, for your patience.
Do you want me to also call in?
Hi, Pharrell. Can you try one more time?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Okay, yeah, we're still having difficulties hearing you. Give me 1 second.
Do you want me to call in?
Recording in progress.
Well, this is getting sorted out. I feel like now is a great time to let everyone know that this is an informational item. We will not be taking a vote, but we will all have the opportunity for feedback, as staff had referenced earlier. Sort of the process that this will sort of follow is that eventually, I think it's Farrell or Farrell. She's going to tell us how you say her name. Ms. Bueller will make her presentation. There will be an opportunity for public comment from the general public. We'll close public comment. There'll be an opportunity for staff to respond to public comment should they so desire, and then we'll bring it back to all of the commissioners up here from the 2 commissions for questions and comments and discussion. And those are our next steps. And that's my best time filler.
That was good.
Thank you, Chair Fields. If I may, Pharrell, can you try one more time, please?
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Okay, yeah, we can still not hear you.
How about
Sorry
I-
about that. Give me
how about I-
one.
Call in.
Call in, yeah.
Are you able to hear me? No.
We appreciate everybody's patience. We'll be right back.
Giovanni.
Recording in progress.
San Mateo, San Mateo, San Mateo, so I'm unmuted right now. Okay. Okay, because I called in on my phone too. Could you hear that one? Okay, yeah, so it's something coming in somehow. Darn it. And we tested it on Giovanna's and it worked, but I don't know if that's because they were personal or if that was the system. Am I not promoted as a panelist somehow? Okay. Okay. Yep. Like my audio. I mean, I tested my speakers and they all say they're working. Uh-huh. Okay. Hmm. Yes. Yep. Can can anybody's personal as the panelist hear me? Like, is there, like, could you hear me if you were called in as a panelist from your phone? Can you hear me? Oh, oh. Yeah, your own personal whatever, and you're listed as panelist and you can't hear me either. Can we hear you through the thing as a panelist in the big room?
Testing.
I can hear you. Testing? No, I'm guessing you can't hear me. Testing? Testing. Monterey, testing. I could try to switch to phone audio. Is it working now? Hi, this is Farrah. Hi, this is Farrell. Yep. Yep. Hi, this is Farrell Buller with 110%. Hi, this is Farrell Buller with 110%. Hi, this is Farrell Buller with 110%. It's all right. It won't pick up.
Okay, try speaking again.
Hi, this is Carol.
Okay, no, it's not working. Farrell, can you try testing again?
Hi, this is Farrell.
It's not working, Farrell. So,
Can you upgrade me from a attendee or unmute me as an attendee?
signed in as this. Okay, try now, Farrell. You, you can try to unmute, Farrell. It still shows muted. You have to hit *9 to unmute. Farrell, you can try to unmute right now. I see your hand raised. You have to hit *9. Okay, now talk. It's still not coming through.
Hi, this is Farrell.
Yeah, Farrell, that's not working. I think it has something to do with the room itself.
Okay.
Try talking again.
Hi, this is Farrell. Hi, this is Farrell.
Try one more time, Farrell.
Hi, this is Farrell.
No, it's not working. No, we didn't touch anything. Mary Way is talking. I don't want.
It's just I was interested in just putting some perspective into, when they do start this projects that require some.
Hi, Farrell. Can you hear me? Can you please unmute?
Hi, this is,
Can you try one more time, please?
hi, this is Farrell.
Farrell, thank you so much. Give us a couple minutes and we'll resume the meeting.
Sounds good.
Of course, no worries.
Fellow commissioners, please come back. Fellow commissioners, please come back. Fellow commissioners, Sabrina, Peter. I think maybe. Huh? Okay, I would like to call this meeting back to order, and we will hear a presentation. Hopefully.
Hi, Farrell. Feel free to get started when you can.
All right, thank you so much for having me. Parks and Recreation Commission, and I know the Senior Citizens Commission has this joint meeting tonight, and so I am happy to be able to join you virtually and share with you a couple of things about being fiscally sustainable and fiscally responsible there at San Mateo. I'm going to talk for a couple of minutes about concepts in general, kind of high level of what's happening in the public parks and recreation system nationally. And then I will get into the project and the steps that have already been completed. San Mateo has done, the Parks and Recreation Department has done some great work over the last we worked on it for about 6 to 9 months. We took a little bit of a hiatus while other things were a priority, and then we're going to come back and do kind of a second phase of this project. I'll share with you what those outcomes are and give you a chance to understand what the next steps are and the input that we're going to be looking for. I just wanted to take a second to briefly introduce our team and myself. As I mentioned, I'm Farrell Buller. I'm here in Colorado. Prior to this role, I worked in public parks and recreation. I worked for 4 municipalities here in Colorado. I started as a therapeutic program coordinator working with individuals with disabilities. I worked as a youth programmer, a senior services specialist. I was the Parks and Recreation Director. I then spent a few years in higher administration as a city manager and a deputy. For the last 3 years, I've been back doing this type of work full time. Our team works full time on the ideas of how we can help communities become fiscally responsible and financially resilient for the long term. All 4 of our people on our team have worked in public parks and recreation. And over the last about 3 years, we've worked with just about 120 organizations in about 46 states. So what are we talking about this evening? Kind of high level concept again, then I'll bring it right into San Mateo, is this idea of parks and reconomics. How do we manage our finite resources? So we want to really be responsible, really good stewards of taxpayer dollars. We say all the time, we have this awesome responsibility of spending other people's money, and we want to make sure we're spending it in a way and in a manner that the community values, that honors who they are. And we want to make sure we're taking care of that resource. We can't always be asking for more. We want to make sure that we're doing the very best we can with the allocated dollars that we have first. I'll give you the quickest history lesson ever in public parks and recreation. This is how we began. So this is 1634. This is Boston Commons. And what you'll notice about this leisure space is how people are playing and participating, right? So they're doing leisure on their own. You don't see yoga mats. You don't see playgrounds and water parks everywhere. People came to gather in green spaces in a really passive manner, or maybe an active manner, but they were doing that independent of you know, a whole business around it, if you will, and a whole culture around it. And we are very thankful for green spaces and the vision and fortitude that was set. Fast forward to the 1980s, again, very quick, a few hundred years forward, and public parks and recreation became this idea of something for everyone. That was our tagline at the national level. And what you started to see was public parks and recreation getting into all types of systems and activities, from serving individuals with disabilities in Special Olympic or specialized programs to more giant, water parks where those used to only be private amenities. We were opening golf courses at a pretty fast pace. We were providing more social and leisure activities for our older adults, our senior citizens. We were buying land, getting in the trail and land acquisition, right? Fitness programs, and the list goes on and on. And while that was really good in concept and really great and noble, and we know people wanted to live their life actively, right, or passively even, what we weren't doing in the 80s and the 90s is actually planning for the long-term future. We weren't saying, hey, how do we take care of all these things 20, 30, 50 years from now? So why did we really start paying closer attention? And I'll date myself a little, I don't care, but I graduated college in the late 90s. And what was happening then is we were trying our best to create systems, but we weren't really financially savvy, and we weren't expected to be. So we're looking at adjusting situations, right, and getting more and more information. So why did we really start to pay closer attention to this over the last 20 to 25 years? A few reasons. The one I'm going to call out this evening is on behalf of Dr. Andy Moen. He works at Penn State University, and he and his research team do a ton of research and data analytics on what's happening fiscally for public parks and recreation. This was one of the articles that he wrote. He did a lot of research in about 2010, 11, 12. And what he started to see was this idea of what was going to be happening with public parks and recreation expenses and revenues. And what he started to do was he tracked what was happening with our expenses specifically and our spending. And what he noticed, and this is probably not a shock to you, is we saw some significant increases in the 90s, right? We were providing that something for everyone type of mentality. It leveled off a little bit through early 2000, 2008-ish. In 2010, we know we had our first kind of economic pitfall, if you will. And so there we started to see a decrease in our spending. What we started to see, though, how those dollars are spent, so we're just looking, one more layer in, if you will, is our total expenses as a profession nationally were about $35.5 billion. And what I want you to pay attention to is the percentages that goes towards operating, right, day-to-day costs, and the percentages that goes towards capital, like facilities and infrastructure and playgrounds and irrigation, things like that. So what you can see in operating is it's at about 66%, and our capital is just under 34%. In 2008, if you track that number, remember those expenses were going up. We have just under $41 billion in expenses of the profession. Operating goes up to almost 72%, and capital investment and spending on capital goes down to about 29%. In 2013, what you'll see is our total expenses went down as a profession to about $32.5 billion, but now 80% of that is in operating and about 20% of that is in capital. What happens at the end of 2023, we don't exactly know, but we do know that there were significant changes, obviously, from COVID in 2020, 2021, we started seeing a significant number of organizations, actually, I think 57% of organizations having to zero out their capital infrastructure budget, meaning they weren't able to take care of that future or place into facilities for some of those investments. The other thing that then happened in about 2023 and 4, there was a lot of funding, right? ARPA funds, all types of different federal funds available to complete projects, to get capital up and going, to even do master plans at time in Parks and Recreation, right? All types of funding resources for local governments to try to play catch up a little bit, if you will. I put this example in here because Portland, Oregon, for a very long time, was considered one of the most elite parks and recreation systems nationally, right? And what they started to notice and track over a 5-year period was that while revenues were increasing at about that 13%, expenditures were already, double that, right? Almost double and a half. They were over 34%. And why this 5-year period is important is because it's representative of what's happened in a lot of organizations, right? Where revenues go up a little bit, but expenses are twofold. If it was our own personal checkbook, we would have a hard time not living day to day or month to month if that's how our spending was going. So we want to be taking a look at organizations that might not be in a great financial place and help them become more fiscally stable. Or we also have organizations that are doing very well financially and they want to stay that way. I'll just give you a little bit of a snapshot in San Mateo. We were so thankful to work with your team. They have already had the fortitude and the vision and the foresight prior to working with us in 2021 and 2022 to have things like a basic cost recovery policy, to be really financially aware of what was happening in their budget, to have some cost recovery goals and some subsidy level goals. There's some components of San Mateo Parks and Recreation Department that are very much in the middle and doing a nice job. Again, we just want to start to set the stage for the future. Now, I know when I talk about money and government, it's probably not popular. Some people are like, oh, those things don't go together. I get it. And the reason is I often find because we have a really hard time balancing this idea of our social service heart with kind of like our business acumen brain. Our social service heart, those of us that work in Parks and Recreation, those of you obviously serving on these commissions, often it's because we want to help people. We want to make things better. We're the quality of life sector, right? We want to have people enjoy their life and be social and live healthy. We'd love to say yes. And at times it's hard to balance that idea of the business side of what is a good decision. When might we need to say, no, not yet, or adjust operations, or really look at fees and charges. So it's continually a balancing act, and we don't make decisions based on only one set of data. We take qualitative data, quantitative data, specific values in the communities, a whole plethora of information that we're looking at as we put forward ideas for you all and your staff to consider what's right for you. Each organization is different, so there isn't like a cut and paste type of answer. Each answer is really dependent on that community's values and needs. If you have questions, I think since we're a little later on our time, maybe jot them down. You can definitely ask them. Normally I would stop multiple times in the session, but I'd like us to just keep going. And it's being recorded, so if you have questions later, obviously I'll be available to you and your staff. So here's the process that we use at 110% that we've created. This is the process that San Mateo also went through. We first started by just kind of the philosophical approach of, are you smart about managing your money? So this isn't something for you to answer, but the idea is, were people paying attention to how we were spending those dollars, how you're spending those dollars? Do they know where it's going? Does it honor the community? Does it speak to the values, right? Is it the expectation of the elected leadership, right? And various staff. And what we did is we looked at both, and we've captured a year's worth of data of direct and indirect costs. As a reminder, direct costs are costs that can be traced back directly to the provision of the service, meaning the cost wouldn't be incurred if the service didn't happen. So for example, swim lessons, in the event that there were no swim lessons taking place, then you wouldn't have the cost of the part-time swim instructor, right? That cost would go away. Indirect costs are costs that will be incurred with or without the provision of the service. They're not traceable to one specific particular program or service, but they do benefit the organization as a whole. So for example, your director, Joanne, her salary, right, would be an indirect cost to all of the programs being offered, because you're going to incur that cost whether you offer one swim lesson or one summer camp. So those are a couple of terms I just want to make sure everybody is refreshed on. And then the other two terms, to just make sure again that we're all thinking about it similarly, or we have the opportunity to. The first one is cost recovery. And when I say cost recovery, what I mean is just recovering or offsetting the cost or the expense of delivering a service. So cost recovery, the word itself, is not meant to be good or bad. It is not about pricing people out of the market. When I say here's a cost recovery, here's the cost recovery, it's not about pricing people out of the market. There are many, many ways to get to a certain cost recovery level of a program or service without raising fees and charges. At times, there is a fee increase. However, there's a lot of other options that we explore first. Cost recovery, if something costs $1 to offer that program or service and you wanted to recover 75% of that cost, and that dollar, you would charge 75 cents. The flip side of that coin, obviously the opposite but different but the same, wasn't very good, is subsidy. So subsidy is a benefit given by the government, typically to remove some type of burden. It's often considered to be in the overall interest of the public good. So again, subsidy isn't good or bad. Subsidy is necessary and needed in public parks and recreation systems, right? In local government. That's why there's dollars that come into the city through the general fund. Subsidy would be if something costs $1 and you wanted to subsidize it 75%, you would simply charge 25 cents. All right, so what is the exact process that we've used thus far with San Mateo? As we've looked at, again, 12 months worth of data, all expenses, all revenues, all programs, all facilities, participation levels, hours offered, staffing costs, all of those components that we can get our hands on. And we look at them when we utilize this tool. This is what we call our three-legged tool. It's based into 3 components of service categories, beneficiary of service, cost of service. Together, these 3 legs create a balanced approach to creating a tax use or revenue enhancement philosophy. All right, service categories, what are they? Well, let's first start with what a service is. So a service is simply an activity, class, course, event, rental, any type of leisure experience offered by the department. So think of it as like going down in layers. So that's a service. So service for San Mateo would be recreation, right? Or it might be parks. Service area, so one layer in, would be where the likeness of the service is the principal consideration for that activity. So if it's a recreation as the service area for this example would be aquatics. And so you have an aquatics senior fit class, and then you have an aquatics swim lesson class as the picture, and then you have an aquatics water park. So aquatics, water, swimming is the like consideration. You get down one more layer and you're like, what's a service category? And so a service category is where the like purpose is the principal consideration. So why are we offering it? How do these align? So for this example, this older adult might be an intro to water fitness class. And then you see the kiddos in the middle, and that would be an intro to football, right? Or intro to flag football class. And then the lady at the bottom would be an intro to pottery or intro to cultural arts. So because they're entry-level classes, that becomes the principal consideration of a service category. So why do we break programs and classes into service categories? A couple of reasons. One, we want to start to eliminate arbitrary goal setting, arbitrary pricing. When people say, why are you charging $5? And we don't really know the answer. We just want it, we know we can do better than that, right? We don't want to say, well, this should be 5 and this should be 7 and this should be 8. We want to know why we're charging that. What is that about? It also discourages attempts to make cost recovery decisions based on special interests or social values. So what I mean by that is we don't want to make cost recovery, or we don't want to make fees and charges decisions based on what somebody does or doesn't like. Well, nobody really likes dance, so we should probably charge more for dance. Everybody likes youth sports, we should charge less for youth sports, right? Or birthday parties, we're just going to pick this amount. So we want to not do things based on our own values and our own special interests. The other reason for service categories is because we want to get closer to having equity-based decision-making. So we want to actually, in public parks and recreation, I say we've been pitting our own programs against each other for years, unintentionally. What we do when we're doing that is we say, well, what's more important, older adults that are healthy and can socialize, or kids that can swim, right? And then we say, what's more or less important, kids that have a safe place for summer camp, or older adults that can get transportation to their medical appointments. What I would say is those are all extremely important to quality of life in communities. So when we break our programs and services into service categories, it diminishes those types of social value debates of who's more important and what's more important. Equity, it also starts to align people with real choice and what's being provided. It's all about the purpose of why it's being done. So here's a couple of examples. So just looking at the images, right? So this is a senior class. We'll call this Intro to Fitness. Youth sports, we'd call this T-ball. And this little boy in aquatics program will learn to swim. What will happen, although these are in different service areas, right? Seniors, sports, aquatics. When we look at service categories, we look at the purpose. These are all beginner level activities. These will end up in the same service category, and I will be showing you yours in a couple of minutes. So they're beginner level activities. They have a similar purpose. At the end of the day, they will have a similar cost recovery goal, or they'll have a similar subsidy level goal, right? Subsidy is, here's how we're investing taxpayer dollars into programs and services. When we look at beneficiary of service, the second leg of the stool, we want to just be asking the question, who's benefiting, right? So for this example, I've taken 2 swimming classes, the little boy in a learn to swim class, and this young lady is in a master level swim class. And so if this is how they were categorized, what we would say is this little boy being in a beginner level class, that class and that type of activity at beginner level is essentially benefiting the community as a whole more than the individual as a whole, right? And the young lady in the master's level swim class, we would say, or competitive level swim class, we would say, is benefiting her more as an individual than the little boy in the common good area, the community good area. With those definitions, and I listed them out here, common good programs and activities, we think of things where there's not competition with non-for-profit groups, right? There's a high value. They're considered essential to being offered by the public parks and recreation system in your community. You'll likely have all of your parks and playgrounds will also be in common good. Everybody can access them. They're essentially closer to barrier-free to participating. When you get more towards the individualized programs or individualized in nature, we say these are more discretionary in nature. They're more exclusive services, right? The individual benefits more than the community as a whole. Maybe there's a higher level of skill and mastery necessary to participate. Often we also start to see some competition with nonprofit or private sector business and organizations. So what we do is we work with your staff to create service categories. And then we do a class and we say, okay, let's identify who's benefiting, beneficiary of service. We use those 2 definitions and they rank, if you will, all of the services from most common good to most individualized. The staff that participated in this, as well as a previous Parks and Recreation Commission, did this work. And they ranked those. What we like about the ranking is everybody has equal voice and equal choice. And what we start to see is there's a lot of alignment between the commission, such as yourself that participated, or the community, right, representatives and staff, in understanding the values placed on your community offered through programs and services. So that creates the beneficiary of service model, which I'll also share with you in just a minute. And then the final leg of the stool is the cost of service analysis. And you might be saying like, well, and what we're doing is we're determining what is the investment, right? What's a subsidy? How much does something cost us to offer? And you might be like, well, why is that so confusing? Why is that hard to figure out? I'm going to show you a little example of why that's hard to figure out in public parks and recreation. And the best way that we've learned to teach this example is actually by starting with an ice cream shop, because everybody understands ice cream. No. So let's say you are the owner of an ice cream store. and you sell one thing, ice cream cones. You sold 50,000 last year. Direct costs would be ice cream cones and napkins. That cost you $50,000, right? $1 a cone. Now you need to add in some indirect costs for things like utilities, management, landscaping equipment, and you spend $100,000 on that. So to calculate the cost of service, you would say, okay, I spent a total of $150,000. I sold 50,000 ice cream. So the division is you need to charge $3 for each ice cream cone. That would get you to 100% cost recovery, right? Or zero subsidy. That doesn't mean you're making a profit. It just means you're covering all your costs. You can keep your doors open. So you did a really good job that first year. So the next year you opened 4 ice cream stores. Well, now what starts to happen is the amount of ice cream cones that are sold at each store varies, right? And so then there's varying costs. Some have more napkins and some have less ice cream. And now you have some shared resources and expenses like senior managers, finance, human resources, landscaping, etc. So determining the cost so that you get to 100% cost recovery for each ice cream at each store, it just becomes a little bit more challenging to calculate. All right, then you look at quality of life services, our public parks and recreation systems, and we look like this, right? We are offering hundreds or thousands of programs in the course of a year. So if you just take the swimming pool, for example, you might have people dropping in to swim, you might have a private swim lesson, you might have a movie happening, a special event, right? So you have all these types of activities happening in that one facility and amenity. At the same time, you have this playground, right, where people can show up and play and participate. And then maybe you have, you know, your one of your community centers where people can go inside and do fitness classes or sports leagues or things. And then you have fields, right? So for this example, the kiddo playing soccer. And so whether they're playing by themselves or they have a rental group out there. So you have all these types of programs and services happening simultaneously. They have unique costs. Staff are working on multitude projects and through a multitude of responsibilities. And then you have shared costs happening. So that's why it gets more complicated to figure out what is the investment in this one program. Bringing it back to Parks and Recreation one more time, we say with an egg hunt, right, a special event, and this is like the nicest egg hunt that I could find where parents are letting their children pick up the eggs and not finding the golden ticket, dragging them through. But direct costs for this type of program, and when we do this work, direct costs would be things like their eggs, the prizes, maybe the part-time staff, all those types of costs that wouldn't be incurred again if the program didn't happen. And indirect costs could be things like the full-time staff, the registration software system, the men and women that mowed the grass to take care of it, right? The marketing materials. So we try to look at all of the costs to determine what's really happening. Once we have all of those costs, we share those with staff, and then they come up with either cost recovery goals or subsidy level goals for each of those service categories. This is an example from Denton, Texas. You are not Denton, Texas, but I just wanted to show it because what they've chosen to do is what you'll see in that red arrow, those are their service categories. And this is how they chose to rank them for their community. Below that in the bold numbers, those are their subsidy amounts. That's how much they plan to invest in those programs and services. So they're going to invest 100% in open access. Open access for them are things like, I don't know, playgrounds, probably going and just walking on grass, right? Maybe a trail amenity, community outreach services, equity services. So as they'll go up, what you see is there's a little bit less subsidy placed in those types of activities. What you see under those bolded numbers, the non-bolded numbers, the CR, that stands for cost recovery. So what would they like to see as their cost recovery goal long-term? The idea is that they want to be able to take care of their future. They want to be able to take care of programs and services, continue to offer them, and possibly be able to help set themselves up for helping support facilities, amenities. Maybe there's new programs that come online, things like that. If you notice the resale category way at the top right, there's no subsidy given towards resale. So that could likely be things like concessions or food and beverage, or I don't know, merchandise, things like that. We're going to say it's food and beverage. What you'll see, the cost recovery goal is 100 to 150%. The average of that is 125. So we recommend a range and we always focus on the average. So if the average was 125%, what they want to be saying is, hey, the message that they're sending is, hey, they don't want to subsidize my personal food and beverage habits, right, out of their concessions. They don't want to spend taxpayer dollars on however many bags of chips or hot dogs or sodas that I drink at a ball game. The other thing that they start to show, and when you show, right, a little bit of profit in there, is this idea to be able to reinvest into your own programs and services. So they're not making money. We promise the department will never be making money. They have a lot of dollars in their open access and their community and their equity services, the other end of the spectrum. However, if they can start to reinvest a little bit into programs and services, that helps them provide for the long-term future. So this is the visual that we've made, that I pulled, that I like to show as part of the whole project and the concept, if you will. So we'll have some programs and services in that continuum that are likely subsidized. There'll be some that go towards some level of cost recovery to be fiscally stable. And then there might be a program or service that is into the profit center. And then at the other end, there might be a program or service that is divested. Maybe you've changed a program or something since. A lot of people changed a few programs after COVID because people were just participating differently. Or maybe certain program numbers only had, 3 to 5 people and they just didn't come back, or they found a different activity that they liked more. So at times we'll divest a program, or somebody else is offering it in the community. And so we don't need to keep offering the same thing. We don't want to duplicate services. So if we divest a program, again, that gives us the ability to reallocate dollars and staff time, or resources, things like that. And if there's some type of profit center, again, we're able to reallocate that back into our program and service area. So how does this actually work? I pulled just one example for you tonight. I would provide 30 if you want to know. I just pulled one example because I think this is the most digestible to understand. So we do this work, we help staff see how they're spending their dollars and what's being allocated. So this is an example from Napa, California. Again, I know you're not Napa, but it's a very clean example. What they learned and what they realized through this work is they were spending about $170,000 a year on hanging flower baskets. So downtown Napa is expected to be beautiful, right? People love coming there for economic reasons, for their own health, right? Things like that. So you'll see that picture of the hanging flower baskets. What they realized was they were spending $170,000 on things like watering them, on things like staff time, right? Those were the biggest expenses. And they have a water shortage. They wanted to become more sustainable from that facet, from the environmental side. So what they did is their recreation manager, actually Katrina Gregory, and some staff came up with an idea to reach out to their group of artists. And the artists decided that they would work with them to make kind of hanging ornamental baskets or hanging ornaments on their light poles downtown. So this is just one of them. It's made of recycled material and glass. What they were able to do is they were able to take then about $160,000 and reinvest it back into other programs and services. So again, it's a way that we look at cost recovery or being financially resilient or fiscally responsible without really making ginormous changes that impact the community in a negative way for Napa. So that's an example I wanted to share. So you do have a list of this, and whether you have them with you or they can be passed out for you to look at. What I wanted to make sure and share with you were the service categories that were determined by the staff, and they've been revised. We recommend if you use this tool and you're utilizing this resource, that you go back in and you revise it for what you need. And so there are 11, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are 11 service categories that all of the classes, courses, events, programs, and facilities, activities fit into somewhere from San Mateo. What you see is a title, a name, you see a short definition, and then you see just a couple of examples of the type of program or activity that would go into that service category. This is not an exhaustive list. This doesn't list all of their classes and programs. It's just to help people recognize and see where these classes have been placed based again on why they're being offered, basically the like purpose of them being offered. So there's an advanced activities course, service category, beginner activities, camps that are contracted, childcare that's being offered, citywide events, competitive activities, drop-in activities, human services, parks and facilities, semi-private and private activities, and then rentals. And so when these service categories were ranked for the beneficiary of service component, this is how they were ranked. So we did an average of how they were ranked by staff, an average of how they were ranked by the then commission. And then we did a hybrid model, and the hybrid model was extremely close to the other two. There was like one nuance. And so we just we being the staff made an executive decision of just one program category to adjust a little bit based on, again, the values there at San Mateo and the direction of the programs and services. So it was really well done. And I think people had a lot of insight and a lot of understanding and a lot of care to why they were offering programs and how the community values them. So this is that beneficiary of service ranking. You see those service categories up that green arrow. And again, they're placed by common good to most individualized from the beneficiary. What you see under that, then we completed the cost of service analysis. And again, since San Mateo really had a huge head start on some cost recovery goals, a policy, if you will, and understanding their data, what we did is work with them for them to identify subsidy level and basically investment level to create this fiscal sustainability model. So what we're seeing and what we're saying is we are Parks and Recreation Department staff, but we plan to subsidize parks and facilities 100 to 95%. We're going to invest in those things with the dollars that were allocated. You go up to human services, we plan to invest in those programs and services 100 to 90%. And again, you can see it all the way up. Once you start to get partway up the continuum, basically what we're saying is, hey, we'll subsidize them some, but we can't continue to fully subsidize everything to the right half of that arrow, because we need to be able to take care of the things, again, in the left half of the arrow, if you will. Why there's a range is because programs and services will already be set at a certain cost recovery. So if there's already a range, it gives staff a little more freedom. It's more, I think it's less scary, just to be honest, to have a range of what's expected. And they can see how things are performing. And everything's not going to perform exactly the same. The other thing with a range is our tool works on the midpoint of each of those ranges. And even when you look at something like parks and facilities, why is it 95%? Well, they might be able to apply for a grant, but they want to be able to say, here's the investment towards we're making toward parks and facilities, and we'd like a grant. Then they would have some revenue, right, if you will, in that item. So again, it's not just based on fees and charges, it's based on the 12 to 15 revenue streams that are available to public parks and recreation systems. So you have your service categories, you have them ranked in the beneficiary of service order, and then you have your subsidy goals. So this is the fiscal sustainability model that we're utilizing right now. And as we move forward into the next kind of phase 2 of the project with San Mateo. And I believe there's a copy of that for each of you as well as you'll have access to this presentation. What I can tell you is that we want to be taking a reality, right? We're looking at what's going on, we're looking at the data, and we'll be matching it with policy. And that's where we're going to move towards is really bringing those two components together to simplify information for you as community members and as commissions representing the community, for staff to understand how to operate and function into the future. And to really be able to hopefully have some robust conversations of the vision of this department in that city, of the expectations, and understanding that when those two things get matched up, you can just provide better programs and services, and we can take care of our facilities better long-term. This is kind of that image that I was talking about when we start to look at impact and we start to look at all of the pieces. We want to be stable economically, we want to be stable environmentally, and we want to be stable socially. All those things are really sustainability in practice, if you will. And when we start to look at policy and we start to look at operational recommendations and we start to equip your staff with tools of how can they stay in line with these expectations, how do they get it right? How do they feel good about it? And I'm talking even to frontline staff, recreation coordinator staff. We want to make sure that we're looking at your community as a whole and not just one individual group. We want to help take care of your whole community with you, as do your staff. So the next couple parts of this project, a couple won't be as visible to you. One of those examples is like a program pricing tool. We've created a specialized tool. We'll be working with your staff, into your frontline staff to say, hey, if you're offering a new program or you're offering this program and we want it to stay within its subsidy level goal, it basically helps calculate numbers based on your own factors. So it'll say, we want to be at, a 40% sub or 50% subsidy. So to be at a 50% of recouping, you'll either need 10 participants at $5 or you'll need 15 participants at $3. And so it helps them, again, get it right and feel really confident in what's being offered. And it helps you as commissions to know that this is being carried through all the way with staff. And it, like I said, it really empowers staff when they have a tool that helps them plan and feel really good about the programs they're offering. So there's a couple of components of that we'll be doing. And then, as was mentioned earlier, this idea of a fiscal sustainability policy will be coming forward to you with some ideas. And why do we create policy? We create it because it creates consistency within the organization. It creates opportunities to help reach long-term goals, financial needs for people that need it, as well as helps really tell the story of what's happening and of how everybody will operate and function. And it builds trust between elected leaders, commissions, staff members, the community. When there's a policy that everybody can see, read, and understand, and everyone says, yes, this is what we're working towards, it builds a lot of government trust, and it has some staying power. It has some teeth, if you will, so that we can get some things done that might take 3, 5, 10, 15 years, right? If you've looked at the cost recovery policy that you currently have, it was set up well. And I think the best way to describe what we plan on doing with that policy and how we plan on kind of working together to get to where we need is we're just going to bring it forward. We've evolved a lot as a profession. I can tell you in the 90s and early 2000s, we've evolved a lot in 25 years on how we can do business acumen better, how we can be better stewards of taxpayer dollars in the community, how we can be more equipped as staff. So I wanted to just lay out a couple of examples of things that will go in this updated fiscal sustainability policy. And when I say that will go in there, I have no idea exactly what's going to go in there yet, because that will come from your ideas. It will also come from interviewing staff. So we build them all somewhat customized, if you will, to what the organization actually needs and wants and what's going to help carry them forward to the future. But some ideas that aren't in your current one that I wanted to point out for you that you might consider down the road. We often call out the need in our fiscal sustainability policies for financial support. We want to be really clear that we have a scholarship program or we have needs-based assistance. We want to help people participate in our programs. We do not want to price people out of the market. We want to help people that need help financially or barriers or whatever those are. We also know everybody doesn't need the exact same amount of help, right? We might put in a policy, or we'll see if it's needed or not, but oftentimes we put in something around partnerships. Looking at a partnership, so it could be your city and your Parks and Recreation Department with an external provider. Maybe they come in and they offer entry level, let's say karate classes, but they have their own karate studio. That could be a partnership. Or maybe there's a partnership with a school district or a youth sports league. We want to create some clear guidelines around reciprocity, right? Partnerships are good when they're a win-win. They shouldn't be one-sided, one or the other. So we'll create some guiding ideas around partnerships if that's of interest to San Mateo, so everybody knows what's going to be happening and how we're going to work together and what the win-win is. The other thing with partnerships and why they're can work so well is to reduce duplication of services and resources. So we know there's hopefully private fitness businesses out there, right? Or private childcare businesses. We don't want to put them out of the market. We don't want to be directly competing with them. What we want to do is say, hey, you're doing great and people need you, and we're doing great and people need us. So maybe we stop offering a class if everybody can do it somewhere else. Or maybe they don't offer a competitive level program because we have the best competitive level program. When we reduce duplication of resources, it really benefits everybody. And when we work with our local businesses, again, they help support our financial bottom line most of the time as well. The other thing we may see and you may determine is useful in your policy are pricing methods. So there's 8 to 10 different types of pricing methods that could be used to determine fees and charges, whether it's competitive pricing, if it's something we want to keep up with the private sector, right? That could be maybe in, a private swim lesson or private tennis lesson, private fitness lesson, right? Personal training. So it might be a competitive pricing. It might be penetration pricing. We just want to get people in the door to come back and then they can see other things. It might be bundle pricing. Buy these 5 programs and get this one free, or buy an annual membership in November and get 1 month free, right? So you see different types of pricing strategies being utilized that benefit the community and also are good for the department. And sometimes we include success metrics. They want to be really clear about services being offered to the community and when we will retire a service possibly or divest it, or when we will add more services if people are on the wait list, for example. So there's a list of questions that we'll be interviewing with your staff to determine what are some of these key ideas and what's really needed. That's an area that, again, as you have input or even just your thoughts on any of the components on this presentation, we'd like to take in and better understand your perspectives. That will help us work better as we craft this policy. We will be bringing back a draft policy, if you will, to this group. And getting your input, there will be a couple iterations, obviously, that go back and forth with staff as well. And again, I think I described these 3 next steps, some fiscal sustainability strategies we'll be teaching with your staff, implementing and using a pricing tool and beginning a fiscal sustainability policy. So thank you for listening. I'm sorry I didn't put pauses in all night, but I also wanted to make sure that I got to share this with you today because I know you've all invested your most precious resource, your time, in showing up this evening. So with that, I'll open it back up to staff and I'm happy to just listen and take thoughts, comments, perspectives, whatever you'd like.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that presentation. It was very comprehensive. I'll say I learned a few things, so thank you. Do you have anything? It's back to us. Yeah.
Through the chair, if you'd like to take a brief recess before taking public comment.
Okay. We're going to take 2 minutes and regroup before public comment. Let's see, we're all back and accounted for. With that, I will say, again, thank you, Ms. Buller, for the presentation, and staff and our amazing city clerk who came, appeared mid-workout to help us with our technical challenges. And I will just say that we're going to open it up for public comment. We'll make public comment 2 minutes. Should you have a public comment, and a reminder, if you are on Zoom, please use the raise your hand button to be called upon, and then please unmute yourself when called upon. Do we have any slips from in the room?
We did not receive any slips in person today.
As I suspected. And do we have any people wishing to make public comment on Zoom?
We do not have any raised hands at this time, Chair Fields.
Oh. Do we? Going to give it a moment. Is that no raised hands at this time?
If you could give us one quick
Sure,
second.
1 second.
Okay, Chair Fields, we do have one speaker, Mitch Spiegel. If you could please unmute yourself.
All right, let's give Mr. Spiegel 2 minutes.
Thanks, everybody, and thanks, committee members. Mitch Spiegel, I'm a District 5 resident. Based on the graph shown, I think it's fairly safe to assume that both the operating expenses and the capital expenses are going to increase, right? Unless we're looking at significant cuts to the programs that we have. I was hoping that the committee could, and especially joint committees, could speak a little bit to, how they plan to raise revenue to cover those things. And also, if there are projects or strategies that are top of mind for them, and for us in San Mateo for city services, and how to fund those into the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Spiegel. Any other comments?
There are no other raised hands at this time, Chair Fields.
Excellent. And then with that, we will close public comment. I will ask, does staff have any interest in responding to that question?
That's not an easy question to answer.
It
but,
sure isn't. That's why I'm giving you the
Yes.
opportunity.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that this is our, first attempt at taking on that challenge and trying to improve our cost recovery overall. So this is a big endeavor for our department, and it will require a lot of feedback as well as training. So this is really our main endeavor this year.
Thank you, Director McGreeny. With that, I will say, let's bring it back to the commission. I think in the interest of sort of time and space, I'm going to sort of start from my left with Commissioner Trapp and move this direction. And if you have questions or comments you'd like to share, questions either directed to staff or to our presenter, now is the time. But also remember, you are not required to ask a question. But if you have one, please, by all means. So Commissioner Trapp, let's begin with you.
Thank you. I do not have any questions at this time.
All right. Commissioner Ocampo.
No questions, but I'd like to say that I absolutely agree with the fiscal sustainability model on the last page. It just makes sense for a higher subsidy to be, like if you're a beginner in a beginner activity, it makes more sense to have a larger subsidy versus if you're more advanced or doing competitive activity. So it looks like there was a lot of thought put into it and looks good.
Excellent. Thank you. Commissioner Chiappi.
Thank you. I have 2 comments, and I'll start with my question. I think I was having a little difficulty trying to picture whether this model will actually recover all the costs, because prices have not been assigned yet, and I don't know if they have, and I'm not aware about it. But I wanted to know, based on examples that were provided from other cities, other parks and recreation department, does this model recover all the costs of the department typically, or is it a percentage of the costs? Because it looks like this is just like a framework, and the second stage is really to come up with a policy. So I'm curious about whether there's been some modeling around pricing to see if it's going to recover all the costs. So that's my question. And then my comments are really just in appreciation for this model. I'm also in support of the idea of having more subsidies for the service categories that are for the common good rather than for the individualized ones. But I was curious about whether there's any of the common good services, parks, for example, would have 100% subsidy. And then the other comment that I have is also with regard to the proposed policy. I'm also in support of the idea that some of the subsidies should be needs-based. And I'm also just curious about whether the department has explored areas where you gave the example of the city of Napa, right? Like the flower, planting the flower in the city. So are there areas where the department could also cut costs and redirect these resources elsewhere? So those are my questions.
Thank you.
I'll try and start with the first one. So the city, we do currently have a cost recovery policy, which was initiated in 2004. That's the last time it's been updated. So this is just streamlining, updating to a new way of thinking of things, and a way that will be more sustainable for staff to maintain. The other one is pretty complex and requires a lot of staff time in order to make it work. This simplifies it. So it's not really, in none of these do we recover all costs. We simply cannot maintain that amount of park land and recover all costs through, charging for yoga classes. So that's not something we can do. So I think that addresses your first comment. So it's not, we're not reinventing this. We're just refreshing it and bringing it up into 2024. And then the second one.
And I would ask Farrell to speak to cost recovery across other agencies, just to give to her perspective in dealing with other agencies.
Sure. So Commissioner Kirby, other organizations nationally, I would say there's a biggest variable as far as their cost recovery or their subsidy level in perpetuity is how big their parks department is. So that is a huge variable across the US. In California, most often we see cost recoveries within departments, I would say between kind of 18 and 40% of being able to recover their costs. Some are higher because they have more profit centers already set up, but that's kind of a ballpark of what we're seeing when we're looking at all costs for a department. And that third question was basically, are there things that could cut and redirect similar to Napa? So we are reevaluating components going forward now that we have kind of your blessing, if you will, and now that we've shared this cost recovery model and the philosophy behind it. Now we're going back and looking at the data, looking at the programs and services, looking at the ones that are being offered now and next. And then one of our upcoming meetings will be with staff to say, hey, here are some strategies that we think you might want to consider to employ. So if it's adjusting operations in a couple of areas, or again, a couple of the program areas are doing very well financially. So could those dollars be reallocated into other programs and services? So yes, we will be looking at those strategies. Staff will be determining what is useful and what the plan is. We just haven't done that step yet in like a thorough manner.
The other question that you had in regards to the 100% subsidy for parks. So we would never, well, I hate to say never. We do not intend to charge people to go to parks. So I'm sure your question is around that, right? So what we mean when we say subsidized, we mean that the general fund pays for all of the expenses associated with keeping parks upkept and maintaining them. What this is in reference to is we may get grant funding or some sort of other funding that will offset what the general fund gives for those expenses. So that's what that is in reference to. And I think you had mentioned something about needs-based. We certainly have a rec fee assistance program. And so we do have a sort of discount, if you will, for programming, and we intend to continue that.
Commissioner Wang, questions and comments?
I have a few. The first one is that it seems that this got started as to analyze what needs to be done in the future, or the current policy is that it was very complex. So my first question is, changing this model, is it going to be simple, or is it still going to be, there's going to be complexities in it? So we're not going to lose the fact that it's going to be complex, are we? Or the city, that is. Do you get my?
So yes.
Yeah, okay,
I'll
yeah.
field that. I think that no matter what we do around cost recovery, it will be complicated. However, this is to help simplify the complexities associated to it. So, and this is a formatting of how we've done pricing. So I think what Pharrell was mentioning earlier on is we've priced senior activities a certain way because seniors are participating. And now we're trying to price them as a category. So you can have a senior beginner class that is more subsidized, a senior intermediate class that is less subsidized, and then a senior advanced class that is hardly subsidized. So that's the rethinking. It's still going to be complex, but I think it's a reimagining of how we're doing our pricing.
Okay, that was one of my other questions. So I didn't know where the seniors fit in. So they're in, I get that. Okay, so another thing that had written before was, because of the pandemic, there's been a realization, I believe, that Parks and Rec isn't really a choice for people, it's a necessity. Or maybe you, being in Parks and Rec, you've always thought of it that way. So has that realization come about because of the pandemic or the economy, that we really need to rethink some of the programming? Or I'm not really sure the rest of my question.
Yeah, I think it's an evolving process where we're always examining what is successful and what is not successful. And I think there's a whole host of things that could affect that. So that's what we intend to do with this implementation of the tool. Is we're looking at attendance, we're looking at efficiencies, we're looking at how we can consolidate some things we may need to eliminate. So it's just looking at all of those things and continuing to look at them as things change.
Excellent. I did like the mention of the fact that redundancies, where in the city of San Mateo, there may be a program that's better than ours and cheaper or whatever. So we would just, rather than compete, just eliminate it. I don't know if you ever thought about that before, but I think that's a great idea. And also maybe the YMCA or some other organizations would think the opposite and come into the city. Okay, I think that's it for now. Thank you. And excellent. I think this whole thing is very terrific. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Wang. Commissioner Swergo-Gadicki, questions, comments?
Excellent. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the presentation and for all this information and analysis. I'm all for making things systematic and rational, and I think this is a very interesting model. I don't have any, because I have no experience in recreation, I have no particular comment on why you have put certain things in, on the continuum. Of course, I do understand that parks and some citywide things, they come from the revenue, and the whole model depends on annual revenue. I have, as you were presenting, I was wondering, has anybody come up with, or will you come up with some kind of a program, a computer program where you can just put in, this is my revenue, this is what the direct cost, indirect cost is, and then see how you line up your percentages? Because I assume that there should never be a deficit, right? You have to do all of this with your revenue, which is, so anyway, have you thought of a program to do this?
I'll let Pharrell speak to that. Yes.
Computer.
Yeah, so we have actually created a cost of service analysis tool so that we can do exactly what you're saying is we can take information that's given to us by the department out of their budgets and help realign it based on their programs and classes. And so then staff get that tool back. Staff can also use the tool. The hope is that we teach them well enough, they use it when we're not working with them, but we'll still be here, so we always answer to simulate. If I make this change, what does that do to the cost recovery, or what does that do to the subsidy level? So there's a simulation piece we've built into that tool, as well as we've created a program tool for coordinators and more frontline staff to be able to utilize to do just what you're saying is identify expenses and revenues and figure out what that will be for the programs and services. So yes, thank you.
Good, I'm happy. I think when you mentioned simulation and modeling, that would be really great to have, And I think that's all. Thank you so much. And I'll be waiting to hear more from you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
And from the department.
Okay, Vice Chair Witcher.
Thank you, Chair Fields. I do have a couple of comments and then some questions. Staff, as always, thank you very much for your time staying late. I understand, and I realize that you're still at work. Pharrell, thank you very much for your time. You're in Colorado, so it would be approaching 11 p.m. your time, if I'm correct, and thank you.
Only 1 hour.
1 hour. Still, thank you. The fiscal sustainability model shown on page 6, to me, looks quite rational and has quite a bit of what I would call common sense in it. And so I have great hope for it. I also thank you for not using the term AI in your presentation once. That's refreshing. A couple of questions. When again did you start working with San Mateo?
We started working with San Mateo in 2022. And so at that time, we were utilizing data from 2021, 2022.
All right. And 2021, 2022 would you consider that to be an aberrant time, given that we had just come out of a pandemic? And behind that question is, if we develop a model based on 2021, 2022, how good is that in 2025 when work and life patterns have returned to close to pre-pandemic, when taxation levels have changed, when interest rates have changed?
Joanne, do you want to answer that, or do you want me to answer that?
Yes, I meant to form that as a question.
You can go first and I'll tack on.
So I think that's a very valid question and a very great point. I would say twofold. Things have changed significantly since 2021, right? 2022. However, what hasn't changed is a number of the programs and services that are being offered. Also, likely department's budget hasn't changed significantly since 2022, right? So some factors have changed. So let's say that the data is now 80% grade or 75% grade. There's still enough data captured from that time frame of setting the stage to look at where recommendations are placed. So, we would likely direct staff or work with staff to say, hey, let's look at this area of private and semi-private because it's a lower subsidy rate and we see, have you made significant changes in this area since that time? So yes, data is as good as data is. However, getting an updated policy also supports the idea of updates towards operations, which impacts fiscal sustainability. And we do recommend that organizations do a second year cost of service analysis when they're ready, when there's been enough changes that they can start to benchmark against themselves. You want to be able to benchmark against your own performance. So yes, enough changes that things have changed, and also a lot of consistencies here still since 2021, 2022 that are worth noting and looking at and considering.
All right, so let me paraphrase that quickly. It sounds like there may be some greater uncertainty than there would have been 6 or 7 years ago when we had not gone through a pandemic and had radically different lifestyle patterns. But based on your experience and with hundreds of municipalities, the model is still updatable, applicable, and can be, it sounds like as part of the process, the model will be refreshed on an annual or biannual basis. Did I catch that correctly?
Yeah, and staff will even have the capability to say, hey, we've looked at these goals and we want to adjust them. So we hope that staff will also continue to adjust those even without the need of a consultant, right?
Great, and that brings me to another quick question. The product that we're buying from you, and say using the pricing model, is there an ongoing license fee?
No, sir.
Something that we then own?
Nope.
Fantastic. You have such great experience. You've worked with so many municipalities, and you've mentioned several times that San Mateo is already in good shape. But I hear from the staff that they're struggling with a complex and very difficult to update model. What do you see based on, so you've been working with San Mateo since 2022. You've looked into the process that we use now. What do you project as the greatest challenges that we have going forward in implementing 110%'s model?
Very candidly, I think there's going to have to be, at some point, some tough decisions made about programs and services and providing, because what you'll see is certain areas that are needed require a great deal of subsidy. And so I think at some point there'll be some conversations on, is this the best use of this resource, and should the Parks and Recreation Department and should the city be providing it? And we see that in cities holistically, right? There's some good, tough conversations to be had. And it's also in the name of taking care of your capital assets. We don't see a lot of local governments, not even Parks and Recreation Departments, that say, hey, we can take care of all of our streets and roads. We can take care of all of our infrastructure and buildings. We can, so that's where, right, when you start to look philosophically and bigger picture, at some point it's good to at least know what's happening so you can make really informed decisions together about what's right for your community.
Yeah, your comment about capital improvements is, I think, particularly important. So you've probably seen we have, what, $120 million in unfunded, hoped for, and all quite worthy capital improvements on the list. To get very pointed, as you've looked at San Mateo and you mentioned we're going to have to make some tough choices, it would be very helpful for me and for the rest of my colleagues if you can pick out a couple of tough choices that you see coming down the road so we can have it there in our heads?
Sure. I would say I will get back to you on that because I want to study some of the strategies that we would employ. What I can say, not as specific, is where we see things often in communities. I don't know if this is your community, but where we often see things are as in this idea of rentals and partnerships. We see a lot of organizations not in a reciprocity, not in a win-win situation with external rental groups utilizing a space for their exclusive use. So whether that is, I don't know your partnership, so off the top of my head right now, but that is an area, I'll say that's a service category that where we often see a lot of subsidy that the city is providing, that it may not be, it's a partnership worth having a conversation to see, is it really apples to apples comparison?
Sure. Good. Thank you. And I'll just reiterate the comment that if we do see coming down the road a very challenging trade-off to be made, it would be fantastic for the commission to have a heads up so that we could just tuck it away in our heads and chew on it over time so that we can come up with good recommendations. Just one last question. On the page 6 framework, we cap out at 0 to 20% subsidy. And I'm thinking about Poplar Creek Golf Course. And could we not have a category that would be less than 0% subsidy? Could we not make a nice profit out of a very nice golf course? So could we not extend this by another category?
So, in the interest of time and getting this item moving, the golf course is not actually part of the scope of what we're working on with 110%. Not to say that we might not include the golf course, but for this process, the golf course is going to remain in its own area of the fee schedule that the city council will approve on the ongoing basis. So the golf course is not part of this, even though it's part of our department, is not part of the scope of this particular project, just because it would just make the project a little bit too hard to manage for right now.
Yeah, that's right. There are several areas of the fee schedule that have nuance to them, and the golf course is one of them. And so at this point in time, we're not incorporating this into how we do the pricing for that. That's not to say we won't in the future.
All right, great. Thank you all very much. No more questions.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Youth Commissioner Jelniker, any comments or questions?
No further questions or comments. Thank you.
Excellent. And I just have a couple. I did have a question. I think that I'm interpreting this correctly, but I saw that there's a 70 to 40% subsidy for childcare. Is that a range based on need? How is it? That's the biggest range I saw. I think that's the biggest range I saw listed here. It seems quite significant. I was curious about how that was determined.
If you look at the service category and for childcare, let me make sure I'm referencing it correctly. That includes summer camps, after school care, and care on no school days. So I think that it gives the broadest range of care types. So that's why it has such a broad range for the subsidies.
Nice. Great. Well, I appreciate that. And, subsidizing kids programs is always worthwhile. I did also want to ask, sort of similar to the Vice Chair's question, are there opportunities for revenue generating products? I know that, listen, I'm thrilled that many of these are highly subsidized programs. But as the public comment implied, there is a need for revenue here. Are there any opportunities for revenue, or are those in perhaps these special categories Suzette had mentioned?
And Pharrell might be better to speak to this as well, but there are challenges in governments making back more money than cost recovery. And I guess I will turn it over to Pharrell because she's probably a lot more eloquent in speaking to this than I am.
I would say based on the data set and some of the very preliminary conversation we've had with your current staff, there are likely some opportunities to increase revenues where you're maybe really below even like market pricing or your the commodity, right? And so yes, I do think as we start looking at pricing strategies and having conversations, we can have a more robust conversation about also like what's the temperature and what's the pulse on certain programs, classes, ideas, and areas, like what's really hot that we want to capture more revenue. And so yes, I do think we will look at those. I guess that crossover, right, or as those come together and those strategies and ideas. But I would say there's a couple opportunities that I would say we should at least consider and look at.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, again, I really appreciate the staff time and energy in this. And I actually was on the commission. I think I'm the only one who was on the commission when this started. So it's nice to see the work continue and move forward. With that, I will ask my fellow commissioners if there are any additional comments. Anybody? Looks like no. Excellent. And I will say to our consultant on Mountain Time, thank you very much for joining us this evening and for bearing with us as we sorted out our beautiful City Hall technological challenges. Somehow we all made it through. With that, I will remind everyone this is an informational item. No action is required, just feedback, and excellent feedback from my fellow commissioners, and nice to be joined by some of the senior commission as well this evening. And I will ask Ms. Magrini, any updates, reports, announcements?
Yes, because this is in lieu of our October meeting, and we do not meet as a senior commission until November either. I just would like to go over a couple of upcoming events for the city. We have our sponsored by Park and Rec as well as our PAL organization, our Police Activities League. We have Dia de los Muertos on Saturday, October 12th at the King Center. That's a free family event from 12 to 3 p.m. We also have our second annual Booze on B event, which will be taking place on Saturday, October 26th from 3 to 5, and that's in conjunction with the DSMA. And that will be on the B Street Pedestrian Mall. Again, a free event for the community. And just a side note on our PAL golf tournament that is sold out for this Friday, you still can get raffle tickets online. So if you want to visit our PAL website to support that endeavor, we'd be happy to have you participate in our raffle. And that's all.
And I would like to say congratulations to Parks and Rec staff on a very successful bark at the park. I believe hopefully first annual. It was a lovely event. Great job, staff, in planning and making that event happen. And I will ask any of my commissioners, any announcements from anyone? Going once? Yes, Commissioner Wang.
I was at the event on Saturday, the Arts and Culture.
Yes,
Fest,
excellent.
and I very much enjoyed it. I was meeting with a lot of artists and trying to get them to mention to them, I should say, setting up shop in San Mateo. So I don't know what will happen, but I may pursue it somehow.
Excellent, excellent. I also was there, and thank you to our friends in the County Arts Commission that helped make that happen, as well as the San Mateo Chamber. Yeah, it was an excellent event. A lot happening in downtown San Mateo this fall. And with that, I will say thank you very much, everyone, and this meeting is adjourned.